Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. A deal has been struck, well, at least some kind of deal. There can be no doubt this first step agreement between Iran and the great powers is of historic significance. It could become the foundation for far-reaching geopolitical shifts in the region. But have no illusions, the naysayers are intent on scuttling the deal. And the use of force, we're told, remains on the table. To crosstalk the Iran nuclear deal, I'm joined by my guest, Richard Weitz in Washington. He is a senior fellow and director of the Center for Political Military Analysis at the Hudson Institute. Also in Washington, we have Daniel McAdams. He is the executive director of the Ron Paul Institute. And in Bangkok, we cross to Pepe Escobar. He's an investigative journalist and author. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I very much encourage it. Pepe, if I can go to you first in Bangkok, what do you make of the deal? Is it a historic deal, and will it go anywhere?
Of course it's historic. I'm sure all our viewers remember Real Men Go to Tehran, the neocons, 10 years ago, before, during, and after the invasion of Iraq. Bunch of losers. Real men do deals with Tehran. So this is the number one, I would say the only one so far, victory for the Obama administration. It could be the beginning of Obama's Nixon in China movement. But it's a long, long shot. We have 6 months ahead of us. We're going to have the Saudi Wahhabi Israeli, well, I could say link, but it's not link. In fact, it's an axis. Badly disguised axis trying to derail this by all means necessary. We're going to have the neocons trying to derail it. We're going to have a lot of Republicans trying to derail it. We're going to have lots of U.S. Congress paid by the Israeli lobby trying to derail it. But we have political will from the part of the Obama administration, political will in Europe, which is also very important, and political will in Tehran, Rouhani, Zarif, and of course the so-called reformers around them against the hardliners, basically Revolutionary Guards. But it's going to be tectonic shift, in fact, and fasten your seatbelts.
Okay, Richard, this Nixon in China analogy is being brought up in the media, and I tend to agree with Pepe. This could be the only positive thing we've seen in the Obama administration do foreign policy-wise in a while. But the odds are against him domestically, at least at this point. What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure if the odds are against him domestically. The Congress has gone along with not enacting any new sanctions, at least for a while. They're now going through the motions of preparing a sanctions resolution, but that would be used only if the 6 months do not result in a longer agreement. And it was suggested that this is just basically negotiating tactics as a means of warning Iran that if the talks do not succeed, then the more sanctions might follow. But I think that the president will get a grace period. I mean, I'm not sure if there's an historic agreement or the Nixon and China analogy holds, but we just don't know. And certainly it's a modest risk for a potentially big gain. So I think people are going to give the president the benefit of the doubt here for a while.
Okay, Daniel, what do you think about that? Because the relationship between the United States and Iran has been deplorable for 33 years. Is this a turning point? Is it possible? I mean, should we be afraid to succeed?
Well, I think what's happening is that the media and certainly Congress is overselling this. What this is a very, very early confidence-building measure. There aren't substantive changes. Iran is taking some minor symbolic steps. The U.S. is releasing a minor amount of money, $7 billion over the next 6 months. Half of that is in assets that have been seized. I think the media will try to overplay this, and the real danger, Peter, is that we're going to go back to, I think it was '06 all over again, where you had the beginning of some confidence-building measures. Iran agreed to suspend, to observe the additional protocols of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and in exchange, it got no sanctions relief whatsoever. So when they suspended their voluntary observation of that additional protocol, that was viewed in Congress and in the U.S. media as, oh, here they are going at it again. So there's a big danger that that the media will sell this as some sort of a final agreement. So if nothing happens in 6 months and they go back to the status quo, then it'll be an additional room for additional sanctions on Iran.
Pepe, if I can go back to you in Bangkok, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says this is a historic mistake, but that tells a lot of people that if it's a historic mistake in his opinion, it must be a good deal.
Look, the historic mistake is Bibi himself. You know, he is the mad dog unleashed and sometimes leashed in the Middle East. Everybody knows that. The non-aligned movement, Russia, China, the bulk of the developing world. The only one who does know about this is U.S. public opinion, most of it, and obviously U.S. corporate media. So he's going to be kicking and screaming like an idiot for the next 6 months on a daily basis. But seriously, the grown-ups are paying attention, Russia and China. And this is something that we should develop in our discussion. The long-run benefits for the whole of Eurasia. This is the beginning of the new great game in Eurasia involving Russia, China, the US, Iran, Turkey, the real big players. Israel is a detail, and Saudi Arabia, come on, it's anachronism 100%.
Okay, Daniel, did you want to jump in there? Go ahead.
Can I break in a little bit,
Go
Pepe?
ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out something that Pepe said earlier. He talked about American public opinion. What's interesting, just in the last day or so, there was a Rasmussen poll that showed that the majority of Americans are backing this interim agreement. So what we might be seeing is a replay of what we saw toward the end of the summer with the Syria situation, where the vast majority of the American people are opposed to an attack. It's very possible that the Americans are tired of this confrontational attitude toward Iran and Syria, and they may be demanding something different. And in that case, there may actually be a danger of a backlash and further resentment toward Israel if Israel continues to do what it's doing, which is sending an army of lobbyists through the halls of Capitol Hill, telling all sorts of horror stories and, getting American congressmen and senators to oppose this deal by any means necessary. So there may be a danger of a backlash. Americans are behind this deal with Iran. They're cautiously optimistic.
Richard, it's currently quite interesting if you look at this interim agreement. Neither side gave away very much. It seems to me that it's more about trust, and it's baby steps of taking trust. And it's the best way of diplomacy. You take a small step, the other one takes a small step. And do you think this is what this 6 months is really all about? Because, I mean, it looks like there's some backsliding on Capitol Hill and in the White House, wondering if it's really truly possible to get an agreement, because we've been told for decades you can't negotiate with Iranians. Suddenly, that's different, isn't it?
Well, I think that the way you phrased it is why we're having this try before you buy 6 months. That there are people who argue you can't trust the Iranian government, and therefore you need to take a small interim agreement and see how that goes before you agree to a larger package. And I agree that's probably the right tactic. I'm not sure, though, if we can so easily dismiss the terms. I suspect that a lot of what we've seen in the interim agreement would find its way into any comprehensive agreement in terms of increased verification and transparency of what the Iranian nuclear activities are, in terms of limits on the extent and intensity of Iranian enrichment, sanctions relief, and so on. So I think that a lot of that, what we're seeing now, would probably find its way into an interim agreement. And of course, they can always roll over the interim agreement for another 6 months if they have to. And so on, indefinitely.
Daniel, if I can go back to you in Washington, it's all, at the end of the day, it's all about enrichment, because they have some countries in the world that say Iran has the right to enrichment, and other countries say they do. And so there's a small number of countries in the world that says Iran doesn't have the right to enrichment, which is really nonsensical, because they are members of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But you still have people in Washington and obviously in Israel saying the same thing. And I want to talk to Pepe later about Saudi Arabia. But it's about enrichment, Daniel.
Well, in fact, there are very few countries in the world that don't believe Iran has the right to enrich uranium.
Right.
In fact, when the U.S. was negotiating the Non-Proliferation Treaty back in the late 60s, the U.S. insisted that Article 4 explicitly provided for the enrichment of uranium. And if you read Article 4 and you have any sort of brain, you realize that the word production of nuclear fuel for the use of nuclear energy, production means enrichment. It's not about some fairies coming down and giving it to you. So it's impossible to read Article 4 and not see that it provides for enrichment.
Okay, Richard, go ahead, jump in. Go ahead, Richard.
I think Thank you. Yeah, I think the argument is not so much that Iran didn't have that right. It's that Iran has taken activities which now call that right into question, because you're not supposed to engage in nuclear activities that could lead to a weapon if you didn't already have a nuclear weapon at the time the treaty was signed.
That's not true.
And there's argument that Iranian activities in the past gave some indication that they were testing designs for a nuclear war, for example, and that would call into question whether they not put that right of enrichment under suspension, at least until more information about their past activities comes to light and safeguards against future activities like that.
Okay, Pepe, what do you see going on in Iran? I mean, how much stonewalling can the Revolutionary Guards, for example, put a stop on this? Because we're focusing all on Washington right now.
Yeah. This is the most important part, the internal situation in Iran. I've been to Iran many times. I'm in contact with a lot of people in different areas, from foreign ministry to hardliners, in fact, even political prisoners. And at the moment, the consensus is Rouhani won. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei gave him a green light, and he delivered. So this means for the next 6 months, there's going to be no internal opposition. But this depends on both sides following what is proposed in the interim agreement. The U.S. respecting their side, and the Europeans, of course, respecting their side of the bargain. And what's going to happen during the negotiations during these next 6 months until May 2014? If the Iranians see that this is going nowhere in terms of respecting their rights to enrich uranium.
Pepe, I'm sorry, I have to jump in here. I have to interrupt you. We're going to go to a short break. And after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on Iran. Stay with RT. Welcome back to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing the nuclear deal with Iran. Okay, Richard, I'd like to go back to you in Washington. I think it's kind of tantalizing to think what if the United States and Iran and its allies, and we have Russia and the international community, actually get a deal, a real deal with Iran, not an interim thing, but going beyond it. It changes the geopolitical space in that region. I mean, we've seen the United States and its allies demonize and marginalize Iran for decades now. This agreement could normalize Iran, quote unquote, in the international community, and that's something significant, way beyond any kind of nuclear deal.
Yes, the logical relationship between Iran and the West is that of alignment. Strategically, the Iranians would want an offshore balancer to help them against more close-in threats. Economically, the natural partner of Iran is the West. They would export their natural resources, oil, and et cetera, and receive advanced technology in the West. But because of Visturi and other developments, this alignment has been broken. So the dominant foreign actors in the Russian and the Iranian economy, for example, are Russia and China. And so you would logically expect Iran to realign with the West in this, a deal could bring that, help bring that process about. But the legacy of history is going to be very difficult to overcome.
Pepe, speak to that, because realignment, because the two major countries that are against this is Israel and Saudi Arabia. They don't want this realignment at all. And this is really what it's all about. They want to keep Iran isolated. And Israel, probably with Saudi Arabia, would like the United States, somebody else, to attack Iran. But the likelihood of that happening is getting smaller, at least for the time being.
Yeah, no, this is not going to happen. This is and these are minor players. I would like to focus on the major players. Once again, this is the new great game in Eurasia. It has been brewing for the past 15 years. Now there's a major realignment in sight. Number one, will the Obama administration, they have until 2016, that's very important, finally recognize Iran as a sovereign independent country with their own independent foreign policy. We still don't know. If that is the case, we're going to have a definitive deal next year. And then we're going to have Russia, China, and Iran, three independent Eurasian powers with independent foreign policy from the West. That's a major development, if it happens, all right? Turkey, very important. I wrote about this last week. Turkey wants to position itself as the crossroads of energy, transit energy from east to west. For that, they need Iranian gas. With no end to sanctions, Iran will sell even more gas to Turkey, through Turkey to Europe. This is what Europeans say. If you talk to Europeans in Brussels, I've been doing this for 15 years, they always say, we need Iranian gas, but we cannot get it because of American sanctions. Russia, they have already a strategic partnership with Iran. China, they already have an energy and commercial partnership with Iran. Commercial is going to be even more increased if Iran is normalized, let's put it this way. So the whole arc from Southwest Asia to East Asia is going to change completely. Okay. So this is what the grown-ups in the room and outside the rooms are waiting.
Daniel, what Pepe is talking about is a major realignment here. I mean, looking at all of our faces here, I can see you, and you know what? We're more or less the same age. That kind of alignment is something that's never been thought of. You know, being aligned with Iran, or at least not having Iran as the great enemy. And this is something that's very new. And you know, gentlemen, ever since the end of the Cold War, a lot of things have happened that none of us ever expected. So, Daniel, détente with Iran.
Yeah, but it's by no means certain. And I think what's important to remember is the structure of U.S. sanctions against Iran. Some of these sanctions were imposed by executive order, therefore President Obama can lift them himself. Some of them are passed as legislation with some limited waivers that Obama has some wiggle room. But quite a bit of the sanctions are written into U.S. law, and the president cannot change those. It would require Congress to change those. And I can see a scenario, there's a huge danger of the president going over to Geneva or wherever and signing a permanent deal, coming back home and having Congress reject the deal. And that would make the U.S., first of all, the laughingstock of the world. And second of all, at that point, I think Pepe's view would come into place anyway, which is that the international sanctions regime would break down at that point. It barely holds together now. The U.S. is barely able to hold it together now for all of the reasons that Pepe outlined. The world is waiting to have an economic relationship with Iran. The world needs it. It's good for the world. So if the deal fails, the sanctions regime will break down. If the deal succeeds, hopefully the sanctions will completely break down as well.
Okay, Richard, let's talk about the role of Congress here in the Israeli lobby. I mean, how much of a headache is this really going to be for Obama? Because, you know, there are people who say that they're all powerful. Other people who say they're not as powerful as you think. But this issue is very important to the Israeli lobby in the United States. Are they going to throw everything at it?
I think we've already seen that's not going to be the case. I think you've seen a lot of the members of Congress have said that they, I mean, they're aware of Israel's concerns and that they share these concerns independent of any lobbying or what have you. There's just a lot of people who are very wary about dealing with Iran and the implications of that. But as I said, it's a modest agreement. It's not, if it fails, it's not a major change from where we are now. And so I think the Congress, as far as I can tell, is just going to let the president try his approach, see no sanctions for 6 months, see what happens. And now if we face a comprehensive agreement, then maybe there'll be a different scenario. Maybe there'll be much more vehement opposition, but I don't see that yet.
Okay, Pepe, you wanted to jump in. Go ahead, Pepe in Thailand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in. Complement what our other guests were saying, in fact. I would say that the Obama administration and Rouhani, they have a window of opportunity of 3 years, in fact. 2014, 15, 16, until the next presidential elections, 2016. If they can evolve towards a comprehensive deal, and there is political will on both sides, they will be strengthened to fight U.S. Congress, neocons, some Republicans, parts of the Israeli lobby, the Wahhabi petrodollar lobby, you name it, in the U.S., and inside Iran, of course, people who are allied with hardcore factions of the Revolutionary Guards, which at the moment, they are being contained by the Supreme Leader himself. But imagine the possibility of the Supreme Leader dying, which is not absurd, within the next 3 years. We could probably have a much more lenient leader, given even more leeway for the Rouhani team to clinch a deal. And if Ayatollah Khamenei stays in this position for the next 3 years, he gave him a green light. This thing is proceeding, unless he already said that 2 days ago, in fact, if our sovereign rights are not infringed, we are open to all sorts of negotiations. So, Khamenei, he's derided in D.C. as a fanatic. He's not. He's an extremely rational player. He saw that what the Ahmadinejad government did for 8 years was completely absurd. It was not working. So, and don't forget, Iranian diplomats, they are first-class diplomats. I had some interactions with them. They are among the most sophisticated diplomats in the world. And I'm sure John Kerry would be able to attest that when he would be talking about his interactions with Zarif.
Richard, if I can go to you in Washington, what are the biggest stumbling blocks over the next 6 months for you? Because there's going to be more inspections. This is, Iran says it's going to open up more, lowered enrichment, and other issues that Iran can easily do and be watched. Okay, who could throw in the monkey wrench? What are issues that could derail during this interim period, in your mind?
I don't see the interim period being much of a problem. I think more what's going to be the problem is converting it to longer term, and that could feed back and negatively affect the interim agreement. Because it's not clear to me yet, has Iran forever forgone the desire or the operation of enrichment to 20%? Are they only going to accept 5% forever? Are they going to continue to keep their centrifuges detached, even though they built them, and rather than put them into the cycle? Are they going to adopt the additional protocol? Can the U.S. remove all the sanctions, as Daniel pointed out? I mean, some of them are executive order. That's easy, but a lot of them would require an act of Congress to repeal. I mean, all those things they'd have to do and to reach a final agreement. And it could be, if it looks like they're not going to do that, then it will feed back negatively the interim. But as I said, I think the interim by itself, it's a modest effort, and therefore I'm not anticipating major problems with execution.
Daniel, what do you think about that? Next 6 months, what do you expect?
No, I think Richard makes a good point. The danger really is, as I said earlier, is that the media sells this as this is the permanent deal here. In Iran, as Richard points out, can never go back to enriching to a higher percentage, for example, for medical isotopes or for other means. The NPT, it does not say to what level uranium can be enriched. They can enrich it as much as they'd like. They simply cannot divert that enriched uranium for the use in nuclear weapons.
Okay, I want to go to Pepe and give Pepe. I want to give Pepe the last word here. I want to give Pepe the last word here. Pepe, all the while, the even media is hang on, Pepe. This is a good question okay. All the while, everyone's looking at Iran, but it looks like Saudi Arabia is just going to buy a weapon from Pakistan. But that doesn't make headlines, does it?
Look, the House of Saud is on the road to absolute irrelevance. It's going to take maybe, 1 year, 2, 3, 5. They're going to have their Arab Spring over there in the eastern province, majority Shiite. They're going to have their Arab Spring, but returning Saudi students that go back to Jeddah and Riyadh studying in the West, they say, this is completely absurd. Let's really modernize this country. So their days are numbered, absolutely. And that's why they're so desperate. And very, very important, even Bandar Bush, our friend Bandar Bush, who thought that he would control everything in Syria, launch a war in Syria. He was provoking Putin to abandon Syria and bomb Iran, you name it. He's got nothing. And now he's even more desperate. And now there's going to be Geneva 2 about Syria in January. And Bandar's goons are not going to be there. So, House of Saud, bye-bye.
Okay, on that point, thank you very much, gentlemen. Many thanks to my guests in Washington and in Bangkok. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, CrossTalk rules.
believes that they will not be scientists. I love you.